Good day, Reading 100 students. I hope you guys are doing well. Today, we are looking at week 8 work, okay? Today, we are looking at the research paper. We are going to look at the discussion, results, and methods, as well as conclusion. Last week, we looked at the abstract and introduction, which explained that the abstract is a very short paragraph that comes at the beginning of the paper, which is usually between 150 to 200 words. And then you have the introduction, which gives more background, more information about a research paper. All right. So I'm going to share my screen with you so that we can both follow. And the more you follow and the more you do the work, the easier it is for you to understand what to do. And if we have a quiz, you'll be able to find the information a lot quicker and easier. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you. Right. So let's start off. So in this segment of the lecture, we're going to look at qualitative versus quantitative, which falls under method. Then we're going to look at discussion and we're going to look at conclusion. Okay, so the method section. So we did the introduction, right, which talked about what is our research about, what is the problem, what is the hypothesis. Hypothesis is when you ask a question, a research question, and you're trying to find the answer to the problem. All right, we did that last week. Now we're looking at methods. Now, methods in the section of a research paper tells us how the research was done. Just think of the word method. How did you collect the information? All right. Why does the method matter? Because it allows other scientists to repeat the same study. So if they see that you've done it in one particular way, they're probably going to do the same with their own population or group that they're trying to do the study with. They show the research is trustworthy and credible. So that means they actually went and they found the information, they did the data collection, and it explains where the data came from and how it was analyzed. So that's what methods mean, okay? Now, in methods, there's always two types in research. You have qualitative method collection and you have quantitative method collection. Qualitative is always in social sciences and it works around themes. And it's usually a lot more heavy based when it comes to collecting information because it focuses on the deeper meaning of things. So, qualitative always includes something like interviews and observation. The sample size of the data is usually smaller, but you're trying to look at patterns and meanings. All right. So sometimes when researchers try to collect data, they have interviews with people. And those interviews are not numbers. You qualitative, you cannot number it, you cannot quantify it. And however, you can look at the themes that each person is saying. Okay. Now, imagine you have a study and you want to see whether students are benefiting from online classes versus not benefiting, okay? And a qualitative would be me conducting interviews with students and say, hey, what has your experience been with online classes? And their answers, I will have to type it down. Okay. I have to type it. It's all words. And I'm going to interview at least about 3 students. That's the thing with qualitative. You do not have a large number of people, it's a lot smaller. And I'm going to interview maybe 3 students. And from those 3 students' answers, I'm going to see the patterns. What are the things that they are saying are similar in their experience, or what is vastly different? So he's trying to look at meanings and patterns. Quantitative is collecting numbers, and quantitative is usually much larger. It's when you want to find out the largest scope of a situation. So, for example, at AUIS, we have about 2,000 students. Right now, all of them are doing classes online. I want to see how many hours they are spending online, which time during the day are they more accessible to online learning. Okay, I want to see how many days a week can they log on to the classes on Moodle. Okay, I want to see what is the class average in terms of grades, when the students do online. So do you see all of that is number-based? So you look at numbers and statistics. So how do we collect this data? You collect it through surveys and big data sets. So if I wanted to know how are students doing with online classes in terms of grades, I will go in and ask other teachers to share with me their grade book. I'll download everything, and all of those numbers will tell, oh, okay, the majority of the students are scoring 80%. From that analysis, I can see majority of the students are doing really well, or I see majority of the students are scoring 50%. Oh, that means online classes is not good for them, okay? So you look at larger samples, you measure and you count, all right? And usually with quantitative, you do it through surveys, much easier. So things such as Google Form, SurveyMonkey, you go through databases, you look at the entire population. So it's not going to be something that is small. You're not going to sit down and interview them. No, you just want to find statistics and numbers. That is quantitative. So you want to look at how much and how many. Right. So let's look at this because I think when you see it in a research paper, it's easier to analyze. So if you look here, this is an example of the methods of a research paper. Okay. So in here, the author says, we created a data set of posts from gabs.com from October 2016 until July 2018. Gab is a social media platform that doesn't moderate harmful content very much. We used 4 experts and 103 crowdsourced workers to classify 10,000 posts. Just by looking at the numbers, you used 103 crowdsourced workers to classify 10,000 posts, okay? We labeled them as fear speech, hate speech, or normal speech. Then we used these results to develop a model to classify 21 million posts in our data set. We calculated how many users, top 10%, post the most fear speech and hate speech. We called them extreme users. We used crowdsourced judges to read pairs of fear speech and hate speech with an ask post which post they believed more. So from that example, you can easily see what type of methods this researcher used. It's clear, quantitative, because they're looking at 10,000 posts, 21 million posts, calculating the top 10%. All of that information is not something you can sit and do by hand. It is mass data collection. Therefore, it is quantitative, okay? So let's look at this. Who did the research? The research was done by GABS, and it was done by experts of 103 crowdsourced workers, okay? Where was the data from? Okay, it looked at 21 million posts across many platforms, okay? How was the data collected? All right, they labeled them for fear speech. They crowdsourced them from 10,000 posts, okay? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Definitely quantitative. So if you look at the methods, you're not only telling me that of how you collected it, but you're telling me exactly the process, step by step. We released a survey to this group of people. We then did this. We labeled each answer as this. Then we did this with the research. So methods, you're really telling people exactly how you collected the data. All right. Once you have collected the data, then we look at the discussion section. All right. Actually, let me see if I can move first. Yeah, discussion section. Sorry, I thought I had the results and I realized that I did not include the results in this one. The discussion section of a research, basically, you are trying to now interpret the information. This is the only place where you can start using your own critical thinking. Every other part of the research, you solely rely on research of other experts, research that you've collected, data that you've collected. You do not give your opinion. You do not give your analysis. You only give your analysis in the discussion section. All right. So discussion. So ask yourself the question, so what? What does this information mean? So number one, you interpret the results. Explain what the findings mean in plain English. All right. In your data, for example, you have 80% of students doing well, okay, in the online classes. A majority of them are scoring 80%. What is your interpretation of that? Well, from that, it appears that the majority of students are actually comfortable with online classes. That's it. Do not try to go back too much, too deep. No, just interpret it in plain English. Connect it to prior research. So, how does your information connect to other people's research? Does it connect or does it disconnect? Is there something that is odd, very strange, for example? Okay. Then you also acknowledge limitation. Now, limitation means what were you not able to do in your research? What was keeping you? So, for example, you can say something like, well, when we did the research, it was really hard to release the survey because it was during a time when most students didn't have access to the internet or they had limited access to the internet. So, you need to be very clear on your limitation. And it's not a negative, it's actually good. It's good to say, when I did the research, I thought it's going to go this way, but actually it went the opposite direction because of X, Y, Z. Okay. Then you suggest future research. So once you have your data and you say, wow, students are doing really well, but you also realize the limitation of students, like they don't always have internet access or they are studying in a different way. They don't do videos, they'd rather do live classes. Then you say future research needs to focus on how online learning can be improved by having more live synchronous session versus asynchronous sessions. Okay, so that is what you do in the discussion section. So let's annotate this. Fear speech is a common occurrence in social media. Extreme fear speech are better connected than extreme hate speech users. They also engage with normal users more. Normal users are more likely to repost things from extreme fear users. Okay. So the underline is the interpretation of the author. So they had the results. What do you interpret? Okay. Where did they explain this? Okay. What was the limitation? If you look there in paragraph 3, unfortunately, fear speech will be hard to moderate or ban from social media. There are no toxic words for computer programs to recognize, and people need to be trained to recognize. So it tells you the limitation, and also it tells you the future suggestion. So better computer programming needs to be established that can actually capture language that is altered towards fear, towards hate speech. Okay, or fear speech. So in your discussion, you tell us what the results interpretation were, okay? Why do you say this? And what were the limitations of your study? And what you suggest future researchers should do, okay? And then the last part, conclusion. You guys know the conclusion already. Conclusion, pretty set and standard in English, okay? In the conclusion, you look at summarizing the whole study, okay? Brief and to the point. You do not add anything extra. You summarize it. You call readers to action. You tell them, this is the information, this is what we found, this is what we suggest needs to be done in the future. If we want to have students to perform better, then we need to invest in resources that allow online learning to be engaging instead of it being passive learning. It needs to be shorter, it needs to be focused. Okay, so this is what your conclusion is. Again, you summarize, brief and to the point. You call the readers to action. It's shorter, it's focused. Okay, so when you put it all together, you have your methods. How did we study it? Then you have your discussion. What does it mean? Okay. From the results, what could you interpret? And then you have your conclusion. What should we do? All right. All right. So I want you to check your understanding. All right. And this comes from the same article that is posted in your reader as well. Okay. I want you to go back and I want you to read that article and I want you to annotate and see whether you can see the differences in each paragraph, what happens in the discussion, what happens in the results, what happens in the method, and how is the conclusion put together. And that is a research paper. Research paper is not an argumentative. It is not something you give your opinion to. It is solely factual and statistically driven. So everything that you discuss needs to come back to the facts and the statistics. It's probably one of the easiest papers to write because you do not need to use a lot of personal um, background information. However, it is one of the most difficult papers to write because you actually have to go and find the information. You actually have to go collect the information. All right. So thank you so much. I will see you guys on Tuesday for live classes at 8 a.m. where we can review this together and complete the task. If you have any questions, you are more than welcome to email me and I will respond to them. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.